White investor said, "You're not startup material." He had no idea who she really was. What happens when a woman in a hoodie with a kid and a life-saving idea is told she's not startup material by a man who holds the keys to the kingdom? He had no idea that 6 months later, he'd be standing in a room where everyone only listened to her. Naomi Bryan didn't wake up thinking she'd be humiliated in front of a room full of millionaires that day. No, her morning started at 5:30 a.m. with the unmistakable crash of a plastic cereal bowl hitting the floor and the scratchy, over-animated sound of a Saturday cartoon echoing from her ancient tablet. Her little brother Jason, 5 years old and fully convinced that breakfast was a full-scale operation requiring noise and supervision, had already set the tone. Naomi didn't groan, didn't roll her eyes. She got up like she had every morning since their mother passed, steady, automatic, like the day didn't wait for her to feel things. This was her rhythm now. No dramatics, no delay, just one quiet command to herself. Get up and don't stall. Jason slurped milk while she powered up her battered Lenovo laptop, half the keys worn blank, the fan loud enough to drown out her thoughts. She checked MedLoop's route schedules, confirmed which teenage couriers had checked in, and ran her eyes over the final slide in her pitch deck, if you could even call it that. These weren't designer slides. This wasn't some polished Silicon Valley presentation. These were Google Docs cobbled together between her overnight shifts at the pharmacy and hand-delivering packages of metformin and asthma inhalers around Flatlands. MedLoop was hers. Not a glamorous tech unicorn with a glossy app and a $1 million domain name. It was a duct-taped, bootstrapped, sometimes works on mobile platform she built herself. Teen couriers from her block, a rented cloud server, a chatbot she taught to handle elderly patients on WhatsApp, and a Google Maps API holding it all together with virtual glue. And guess what? It worked. Against every odd. Over the last 3 months, those teenagers had made 172 deliveries to residents who otherwise had no way of getting their medicine. Most of them elderly, most of them Black, and nearly all forgotten by the systems that were supposed to serve them. This community-powered, no-frills, run-on-passion network, this was what Naomi planned to pitch that morning. In theory, the Vanguard Futures pitch event was held in a building with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over Manhattan's skyline. One of those towers where even the elevator seemed to know whether or not you belonged. And Naomi? She wasn't invited, no lanyard, no mentor from Stanford or Berkeley. The sitter she'd arranged for Jason texted her an hour before she left. Sorry, can't make it. So he came with her. She braided his hair, dressed him in a clean button-up, and packed his little backpack with snacks and an iPad loaded with enough episodes of Paw Patrol to hopefully keep him busy. She threw on a hoodie she'd bought from a thrift shop, gray, slightly oversized, with MIT across the chest. Not because she went there, but because she wanted to. At the door, the security guard gave her that look, the one you know before they even speak. "I'm catering," she said flatly, eyes forward. "Where's the food?" he asked, one eyebrow raised. "I'm logistics, external drop-off. You want to call upstairs, be my guest," she said, already walking. "Or you can let me do my job." It worked. 5 minutes later, Naomi was standing in the back of the conference room, surrounded by suits with watches more expensive than her rent. There was a certain smell to that room, ambition mixed with old money and lavender hand sanitizer. She didn't belong, and she knew it, but she wasn't here to belong. She was here to be heard. Then came the moment. The host opened the floor for community pitches. A few heads tilted. Some whispered. Naomi raised her hand. The reaction was swift. "Who is she?" "She's not on the list." "Is that a child with her?" But then, a man in a navy suit, silver hair, and shoes so polished they could blind you, gestured to let her speak. Craig Hunt, founder of the Vanguard Futures Fund, a name with pull, the kind of man whose shrug could end a startup before it began, or light it on fire. Naomi stepped to the mic. "Good morning," she began, voice even. "My name is Naomi Bryan. I created MedLoop, a community delivery network for essential medications in neighborhoods that the major pharmacy chains have long since written off. We're not just a service, we're a survival system. I'm not here to ask for millions. I'm here to scale a model that already works, because a person's chance of staying alive should not depend on whether or not they own a car." Silence, real silence. Even Jason paused his video and looked up. Craig Hunt stood, crossed his arms. "Let me clarify, Miss Bryan, was it? You're asking us to fund bike deliveries of pills?" he said with a half smirk. "It's insulin, inhalers, antidepressants," Naomi replied. "Things people don't get when they have got no car and 3 jobs." He chuckled, head tilting slightly. "You're sweet, really. But this isn't a startup. This is pity, sprinkled with charity. You're not startup material. Laughter, polite, clean, the kind that cuts without raising its voice. Naomi didn't flinch. She looked him dead in the eye. Not with rage, with clarity. Define startup material, Mr. Hunt. Is it the guy with the smartwatch and a fifth failed round of funding for drone coffee delivery? Or the woman building a working system in a forgotten zip code without anyone's blessing? He raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. This isn't business. This is a mission. Missions don't scale. Missions don't pay back investors. Then a soft voice, small but firm. She saved Mr. Collins, Jason said from the back of the room, standing by the wall, tablet under his arm. He would have died. I was there. You could feel the room contract, tighten. Some of those polished suits cleared their throats. Craig Hunt turned his head, slowly, and for once didn't speak. Naomi grabbed her backpack and took Jason's hand. No one escorted her out. She walked, proud and furious. At the lobby, a young man in a wrinkled blazer caught up to her. I saw your pitch. That was powerful. Here's my card, he said, offering it. We're working on something similar in Cape Town. Let's connect. She took it without a word. Not because she believed, just because she knew how cold the street outside could be. That night, back in their tiny kitchen, still warm from the rice cooker, stacked with papers, and surrounded by the smell of fabric softener and tape, Naomi opened her phone, logged into LinkedIn, checked her notifications, one message. Amira El Fayez, your voice is what we've been waiting for. Message me if you're open to a conversation. The morning didn't greet Naomi with the comfort of warm coffee. It slapped her awake with the blazing headline on her laptop screen. She sat rigid in the hardback chair of the neighborhood library, the kind of chair that creaks louder than her old spine when she leans back, while drafty windows shook with winter's chill, as if laughing at the idea that public spaces are always warm and welcoming. Across from her, Jason meticulously assembled a digital puzzle on his tablet, his forehead scrunched in concentration, cartoon characters beaming at him in fluorescent glory. Naomi's gaze shifted to her screen, where the banner of TechWave glowed with a provocative question. Social welfare gimmick or real startup? Why the white investor turned down the pitch day heroine? Every part of her impassioned words, Craig Hunt's practiced smirk, the scarring phrase, not startup material, lay exposed, highlighted in burnt orange text against a white background. She scrolled through the comments section and felt each barb like a fresh shove. Of course she brought a kid along. What was she thinking? If she's so smart, why isn't she employed? Heart-tugging stories don't build businesses. Her chest tightened. Chestnut memories of every time she felt overlooked rising like bile. Pulling her cardigan tighter, Naomi slid from her seat and headed toward the bathroom, brushing past worn books and a row of other patrons looking half awake. She stared into the mirror above the sink, water pooling in the shallow basin below. Fingers dipped her face, warming herself with cold water. She whispered softly to the reflection. You look tired, she muttered. Then her own response came, as sharp and clear as a bell, but not broken, because that morning marked the moment she decided, let them talk. She wasn't here to earn applause. She was here to be heard. Later that day, as she paced her cramped apartment, phone buzzing in the pocket of her hoodie, she found a single message from Amira El Fayez. I'm in New York through Friday. Can we meet tomorrow at 11? Does that work for you? Naomi didn't hesitate. She flipped open her transport app, saw the meeting point clear across Brooklyn, nearly 7 miles and 4 transfers away. She considered pawning her old juicer mixer to pay for the ride, knowing the street was colder and harder than any fare. But she didn't stop. Instead, she chose her boots and walked, because she was building something that's always been built on footsteps, grit, and refusal to surrender. Jason stayed behind with Mrs. Davis, the neighbor whose apartment smelled perpetually of pungent onions and rose-flavored cologne left in the open from 1998. Naomi kissed his forehead and said she'd be back. The Office of Global Urban Futures was a far cry from the glossy towers she'd crashed the day before. No security guards, no glass double doors, no designer furniture. Instead, there was a world map thumbtacked on driftwood walls, a sofa patched in 3 places, and a self-serve coffee barrel labeled, "No sugar, we like it that way." The presence of that barrel felt like a test. Would she handle authenticity better than presentation? Amira appeared from the back, about 50, denim jeans, close-cropped hair, and a Judge Nocherer t-shirt that boldly proclaimed, infrastructure is love language. No pity, no condescension, just presence. I've never seen a project scale like this on a wing and a prayer budget, she said, voice low but curious. Tell me everything, from that Google sheet to the final mile on each bike. Naomi took a breath. She began with code snippets, spreadsheets with color-coded tabs, teen couriers clocking in from public housing. the local pharmacist who discounted retro insulin because he believed in her, and the blocks full of elders and single mothers who'd given up hope until someone knocked and said, "We'll bring what you need." Amira said nothing while Naomi spoke, only nodding, sometimes jotting notes on the back of a napkin. When she paused, Amira asked gently, "What's holding you back from scaling?" Naomi laughed, bitter light carrying the world's unfunny joke. She tapped the table. "Money. And more than that, the mindset. Investors want unicorns. They want Pegasus with a billion-dollar bow. I'm more like a pony with a first aid kit." Amira looked at her, a steady gaze. "We don't give grants," she said. "We take equity. We don't sponsor. We partner." Naomi lifted one eyebrow. "I don't have the jacket, the financial forecast, or a CEO title on LinkedIn. What I do have is a block full of problems and proof I can fix them," Amira smiled. "And that matters more than half the PowerPoints in Silicon Valley boardrooms." The next morning, a van pulled up outside Naomi's building. 3 of Amira's team, 2 black men with serious faces and 1 woman, clipboard in hand. No cameras, no entourage, just presence. Naomi led them on a walking tour. The pharmacy doorway where Mrs. Turner handed packages to Tori, a lanky teen with gentle eyes. Corners where insulin arrived before blood sugar forced hospital visits. Bodega stalls where forgotten seniors waited. She pointed to a young man, tattoos down his arms, face serious as he clipped his helmet. "He was in my summer robotics group," she explained. "He told me last year he didn't want to go back to prison. Now he's delivering medical hope, not doing time." They snapped photos, jotted down testimonies. Evening came, and they reconvened in that office with the patch sofa. A screen glowed with a global map, dots across Africa, South America, Southeast Asia. "We're building this in Kigali," Amira announced. "Your experience is rare, Naomi. Take 40%, let us take 60%. We bring money, team, infrastructure. You bring the models and the grit." Naomi looked at the map, then at each face around the table. Her voice was steady. "If you can ensure Jason never misses school because I can't afford the bus, or dinner because tonight's too cold, then I'm with you." The room went silent. These weren't empty words. They were terms born of sacrifice. 2 days later, she signed the papers. Not in a Manhattan boardroom, but at a subway-adjacent cafe, ceramic mugs and chipped milk jugs. Tori sat opposite her, sipping weak coffee, shaking his head in quiet disbelief. "No one's going to call you not startup material now," he said. Naomi laughed, something deep and true. "Yeah," she said, "I'm officially a startup mama." But old ghosts linger. A week later, Naomi's image reappeared online, this time as the face of an international medical logistics program. There she was, badge clipped to her MIT hoodie, Jason on one arm, staff and teens around her, route maps in the background. Social media lit up with praise, and the same tired jabs. Just another social agenda puppet. We'll see how long she lasts without deep pockets. And not surprisingly, Craig Hunt slid into her LinkedIn DMs again. "Impressive. Open to exploring an involvement. Terms, your choice." Naomi didn't reply. In the sudden hush of dinner, she cleaved off a chunk of roasted chicken, sliding it across her plate as Jason munched in order, picking bits off the bone. He looked up at her, eyes wide. "Mom," he asked, voice soft and small, "what does terms, your choice mean?" She paused. Knife hovered. "It means," Naomi said steadily, "they're finally listening. But now the question is, are we done listening to them?" Jason blinked, nodding. They held that moment, in the hum of the fridge, the smell of rice and roasted vegetables, into a silence that would outlast the buzz online. She didn't type a reply to Craig or post anything bragging. She didn't spew feel-good quotes or boardroom cheer. She sat with the screen off and thought about the steps she'd taken, and those she would still take. Her story was no longer just her own. It belonged to the folks who needed their medicine, to Tori delivering hope one block at a time, to Mrs. Turner nodding when the package arrived early, to Jason, learning that being heard means sometimes you have to walk across a burrow to earn a seat. Because this isn't a story about redemption, it's about refusal. Refusing to fit someone else's mold. Refusing to let someone else define the value of a black woman with a plan and a purpose. And so, a new morning waited beyond that dinner. But Naomi didn't need the sunrise to tell her so. She'd already learned that the light was inside her, reliable, undimmed, and ready to move forward. 1 mile, 1 partner, 1 dose of insulin at a time. Naomi walked into the hall like every step held history. Not rushed, not hesitant. Each heel to marble contact was deliberate, like she knew the floor needed to remember her presence. She was not the girl in the hoodie anymore, curled in the back row with a child asleep on her lap. Number today, she wore a clean, understated suit. No flashy brand tags, just tailored precision from a small shop in the Bronx that knew how to make a woman look like she had been running things for years, even if she only just started getting recognized. Tori walked on her right, her first volunteer, her summer school robotics kid who used to dodge trouble, now her regional coordinator. Clean cut, head held high. And on her left, Amira El Fayez, the same woman who saw a startup where others saw sympathy work. Together, they formed a front line of proof. They didn't just walk into that conference room. They stepped into it as a warning. The crowd inside was thick with suits and screens. Tech Justice NY had gathered over 300 venture capitalists, public health strategists, nonprofit leaders, tech founders, all buzzing with that particular tension that happens when money tries to figure out how to feel good about itself. But Naomi didn't walk in to impress. She walked in to be undeniable. The conference opened on time, all procedural smiles and polished intros. But when Naomi's name came up, it wasn't a gift, it was earned. Because her model now operated in 6 countries, had cut emergency room visits in rural South Africa, lowered diabetic shock cases in Harlem, and reached households that even Amazon wouldn't dare label eligible for Prime. And respect, real respect, doesn't come with applause. It comes with consistency. It comes with showing up again and again until even your silence starts to speak. She took the stage, calm, head up, no slides behind her, just her name, and a single phrase below it, MedLoop, built where no one looked. She gripped the mic. A few months ago, she began, voice steady but with a smirk of memory, a well-regarded man told me I wasn't startup material. She let the pause hang, heavy, like thunder right before it strikes. I didn't respond then, because I didn't owe him a response. I wasn't asking permission to build what my neighborhood needed. I wasn't asking for praise. I was doing the work, quietly, effectively. And guess what? She leaned forward slightly. The room leaned with her. Getting insulin to a grandmother faster than Amazon can ship a toothbrush? That's not a mission. That's business. Real business. You just didn't recognize it because it didn't show up in the body you expected, with the accent you respect, in the Ivy League resume you worship. The room sat in a silence so taut it could snap glass. No throat clearing, no whispered notes, just stillness. And in the front row, he was there. Craig Hunt, the investor with the power to open doors or close them with a shrug. He didn't look embarrassed. Not quite. He looked like a man who had finally realized his mistake hadn't been about data or model. It had been about vision, about what he chose not to see. After her talk, the crowd erupted. Business cards flicked toward her like confetti, hands reaching. Invites murmured in rapid fire. But Naomi wasn't looking for applause. She stepped down, walked past the crowd with the focus of someone heading straight for one conversation and one conversation only. "Mr. Hunt," she said, soft but sharp. No anger, just directness. He rose from his seat, met her gaze. "I remember," he said, "and I believe I owe you an apology. I saw only the packaging, not the purpose." "You don't owe me an apology," she replied, "but you do owe something more important, awareness. Because people like you, your words shape who gets seen, who gets funded, who gets a chance to stand in the light. I don't live in the shadow anymore." He offered his hand. She shook it, not out of forgiveness, but as a professional courtesy, a silent agreement that next time, the room should see clearer, earlier. But the real climax didn't happen in that conference room, under lights and LinkedIn posts. It happened a week later, quietly, back in Brooklyn, where it always begins. Naomi returned to her block. The vans were still humming. Tori was back on dispatch. Kids on scooters were still shuttling brown paper bags with labels printed from a cheap HP inkjet. Jason was brushing his teeth, packing his bag for school. It felt normal, until the call came. An international medical coalition wanted her to speak at their annual summit in Geneva. Not to attend, not to observe, but to deliver the keynote. That night, she sat on her rooftop, laptop balanced on her knees, fingers tapping out the first draft of her next speech. Jason curled under her arm, wrapped in his worn blanket, eyes blinking sleepily. "You're like the president now?" he asked, half muffled into her hoodie. "No, baby," she whispered, kissing the top of his head. "I'm just someone who tells the truth. And now people are finally listening." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Can I be like you one day?" She paused, closed the laptop. "No," she said softly. "You'll be better, because you won't have to fight to be heard." A month later, Geneva, a marble stage, a podium with her name etched in digital letters. Behind her, a glowing map showing MedLoop's routes, dots pulsing across continents, each one a promise kept. Ministers, health executives, global fund managers filled the room. The same kinds of people who once dismissed voices like hers as too local, too emotional, too community-based to scale. Naomi looked at them, not to beg, but to remind. Respect, she said, begins where disdain ends. Not in a logo, not in a billion-dollar IPO. It begins in action. We're not saving the world. We're just refusing to let it fall apart on the backs of the people it ignores. The applause was polite at first, reserved. Then something shifted. One by one, ministers approached her. One offered to pilot MedLoop in South Africa. Another spoke of integrating her system into India's rural pharmacy network. Amira watched from the wings, arms crossed, a small, proud smile under her eyes. She didn't have to say anything. You did it, without waiting for permission, without apologizing for being real. Craig Hunt? Oh, his firm made moves too. A few months later, they released a shiny report titled Investing in Local Innovation, The Next Frontier. MedLoop was in it, not by name, not by Naomi, just a grassroots logistics success. She didn't mind, because now when someone asked, do you have endorsements? Do you have big names behind you? She smiled. I've got a neighborhood, a working system, and time. What I want to know is, do you have a conscience? That evening, Naomi sat on her living room floor. Jason climbed into her lap, pressing his little fingers against the letters of her summit badge. What does this say? He asked. She looked down. It means, she said, voice soft but unshakable, I didn't stay quiet, and now the world listens.